starting his day as a personal assistant. Orm took the time to attend campus and attend morning classes, considering that Ling's shooting schedule only started after lunch. Even though he is busy, Orm feels it is important to stay connected with his friends on campus. While waiting for class to start, he decided to have breakfast in the cafeteria. Excitedly, he sat in the corner of the cafe and started enjoying the toast served. The calm morning atmosphere made him feel comfortable, but his calm didn't last long. Orm Kornnaphat, cough. Orm choked when he heard the scream, so shocked he almost spilled his food. He immediately took a sip of his drink and looked back. "You guys just shocked me," he grumbled, still shocked. "Lucky I didn't choke to death. If you die, we will die too," said Priking jokingly, accompanied by laughter from his friends. "I don't want to die yet," said View, not agreeing with the idea. View, Priking, and Milk also took their seats at Orm's table. They immediately ordered food, and while waiting, the conversation started. "Why are you in class in the morning? Didn't you say Kunling was very busy filming?" Milk asked curiously. "Peeling a shooting schedule starts after lunch, so I can still take the exam this morning," Orm answered while eating his food hungrily. "Even though you can take a supplementary exam if you want," said Priking, giving another option. Orm hit the table lightly with the palm of his hand. "Are you crazy? Mr. Mario is very cruel, and I don't dare to take supplementary classes," Orm replied firmly with a serious expression. "But if peeling a shooting schedule is from the morning, you will definitely be forced taking a supplementary class," said Milk, emphasizing his argument. "Fortunately, fate was on my side," answered Orm proudly, then drank his watermelon juice with a big smile. After a while of joking, Orm felt there was something he wanted to ask. Hesitantly, he changed the topic. "By the way, I wanted to ask you guys, what do you want to ask?" Milk, View, and Priking looked interested, looking at Orm seriously. "If your heart beats fast when you're close to someone, is that a sign you're in love?" Orm asked, his tone quite serious. The three friends were silent for a moment, seeming to ponder the question. View finally spoke up. "It could be. Maybe it's a sign that we feel attracted to that person. Or maybe it's just the effect of anxiety," added Priking, trying provide a different point of view. Milk nodded in agreement. "Maybe it's a combination of both. Falling in love can really make you nervous." Orm seemed to think for a moment, hearing the different answers from the three, his friends. He looked at them seriously, trying to summarize all the information he had just heard. "Then, what is the difference between liking because of love and liking because of admiration?" he asked in a curious tone. The three friends were silent for a moment, contemplating Orm's question, which seemed quite deep. View was the first to answer. In my opinion, feelings of liking because love are deeper and involve more complex emotions. We are not only attracted to his physical appearance, but also to his personality and way of thinking." Priking nodded in agreement. "That's right. While liking because of admiration is usually more superficial. We may admire someone because of their talent, appearance, or achievements, but that's not always the case. Means we fell in love with him." Milk added, "So, you could say that love involves commitment and the desire to support each other, while liking for admiration may be more of an admiration, without a desire to get closer." Orm nodded, digesting each of his friends' explanations. "So then, can we fall in love with someone we initially only admire?" he asked, increasingly curious. "Yes, that's possible," replied View casually. "Sometimes, admiration can develop into love over time, especially if we spend a lot with that person and accidentally get to know that person more deeply." "That's interesting," Orm muttered, feeling like he had the answer to his feelings now. "Why do you ask? Have you started to fall in love with Pimin?" Milk asked teasingly, a mischievous smile on her face. Well, I told you that Pimin and I are like brother and sister. We are only close because our parents asked us to, Orm answered firmly, trying to refute this obviously untrue assumption. Priking suddenly looked at Orm with a serious look, making the atmosphere a little tense. You're in love with Peeling, aren't you? Huh? Orm was surprised to hear that assumption. I've said it many times. I only admire Peeling because she's an artist. Priking didn't give up. Admire, huh? But you were alone. Asked about the difference between admiration and love. Are you sure it's just admiration? He asked, narrowing his eyes. That's right, continued Milk quickly, adding to the atmosphere. Just say that you like Peeling. Besides, you two are both single. There's nothing wrong. That's not possible, Orm answered quickly, trying to deny it. Peeling is a famous artist, while I'm just her personal assistant. Besides, I don't think Peeling is interested in people of the same sex. His face showed a hint of disappointment, even though he tried to cover it. But you like her, right? That admiration has developed into love? Priking asked again, piercing deeper into Orm's feelings. Orm was silent. He looked down for a moment, as if searching for an answer in his own heart. The atmosphere at the table suddenly became quiet, his friends waiting patiently. After what seemed like an eternity, Orm sighed heavily and finally nodded slowly. Milk immediately patted Orm's back gently, sympathizing with his friend in such a state. Don't be sad, Orm. We don't know whether or not Peeling is attracted to the same sex. Besides, who says dating a boy means you can't like the same sex? Just look at the example. View, she used to think Pigeon couldn't like the same sex, but now they're dating, he said, trying to give hope. Hearing her name mentioned, View immediately added, that's right. I used to have doubts, but because I kept approaching Pigeon, I was able to make her realize her true feelings. The important thing is that you try first. Approach Peeling. Who knows, she also has the same feelings. Priking nodded in agreement, encouraging Orm. That's right, after all. It's now legal for same-sex marriage in Thailand. It's not a taboo anymore. Peeling being an actress isn't a big deal either. You're both humans with feelings. Exactly, said Milk excitedly. Don't give up, Orm. We're here to support you no matter what. Orm was silent for a moment, his eyes looking at his three friends one by one. A small smile appeared on his face, a warm feeling flowing in his heart from the unconditional support of his friends. Thank you, friends, he said sincerely. He felt grateful to be surrounded by people who always supported him, no matter how complicated his feelings were. Cut! A loud shout from Pina, the director, instantly made Ling stop her acting. She let out a sigh of relief, back to being herself after a moment of immersion in her character. Pina walked over to the crew and said, "We'll take a short break, and then move to another location." Ling smiled, relieved to be given a short break. She walked casually to where Orm sat waiting. When she arrived, Orm quickly handed her a bottle of cold drink. "Thank you, Nong," Ling said as she accepted the bottle with a warm smile. She took a small sip of the drink, then her gaze shifted to Orm, who seemed to be busy staring at his iPad screen, probably organizing his schedule or checking messages. "Norm ka," Ling called in a sweet tone, making Orm look up quickly. He looked at Ling with a smile. Diterjemakan dengan Deepo https www.deepo.com app _source equals Android and _medium equals app and _campaign equals share translation. "Yes, Peeling," replied Orm softly. Ling was silent for a moment, then with a curious expression asked, "How did I look? Did I act well?" Orm, who had seen Ling act many times, smiled appreciatively. Peeling's appearance is always beautiful, and the acting, there's no doubt about it. Peeling is amazing, he replied confidently, raising both thumbs in praise. Ling chuckled, feeling pleased, but suddenly asked again in a joking tone, "You like me?" Huh? Orm was surprised to hear the question. His eyes widened slightly, unsure of Ling's intentions. Taking a breath, Ling hurriedly corrected her words, feeling that she had been a little too open. "I mean, do you like my appearance in this series? Considering it's about the 90s, she said, trying to change the subject quickly. Orm smiled, relieved that Ling had made her point clear. "Of course I like Peeling as performance. No matter what the theme is, Peeling always fits into any role. Your charisma always shines through on screen," Orm said, sincerely, his face radiating admiration. Hearing that, Ling smiled even wider. There was something different in her happiness this time, not just because of the compliments about her acting or performance that she usually received from people, but because they came from Orm. It was as if, when Orm said it, the words had a deeper meaning. "Come on, we're moving locations now." One of the crew gave directions and soon Ling, Orm, and the rest of the production team were ready to move to a new location. The location they were headed to was actually not far from the previous one, but before they had walked far, a heavy downpour suddenly poured down without warning. Umbrellas, exclaimed Pina, the director, who looked panicked. He immediately prioritized the actors and actresses so that they wouldn't get wet. Orm, who had quickly obtained an umbrella from the rest of the crew, opened it and swiftly took Ling under his wing. However, because the umbrella was too small, only Ling was protected from the rain, while Orm was drenched in rainwater. Ling, realizing Orm was wet, immediately asked one of the crew, "Are there no more umbrellas?" The crew member regretfully replied, "Sorry, Kun Ling. There are only this many umbrellas. We didn't expect it to rain so hard." Hearing that answer, Ling looked a little upset. However, she held back her emotions and looked back at Orm, who was still faithfully shading her. Wordlessly, Ling pulled Orm's body closer to her, trying to shield him from the rain. "It's okay, Peeling." Orm tried to move away slightly as he said, "This umbrella is too small. Let Peeling wear it." Diterjemakan dengan Depo https www.depo.com app _source equals Android and _medium equals app and _campaign equals share translation. Ling gave Orm a stern look. He pulled Orm's waist tighter, making sure Orm's body was under the umbrella. "This umbrella is enough for both of us. I don't want you to get sick from the rain," Ling said as he looked into Orm's eyes, his other hand firmly holding Orm's waist. Orm looked hesitant for a moment, but still tried to subtly refuse. "I'm really okay, Peeling. Besides, it's only a few steps to the next location." Ling sighed softly, then said, "All right," as if giving up. But suddenly, Ling took over the umbrella from Orm's hand and tried to close it. "If you don't want to use the umbrella, I won't use it either." Seeing Ling's movement to close the umbrella, Orm quickly restrained Ling's hand. "No, Peeling," he said in a slightly panicked tone. "I'll wear the umbrella with Peeling." Hearing that, Ling smiled with satisfaction. Without saying more, Ling hugged Orm's waist tighter with his left hand, while his right hand continued to hold Orm's hand, which was now holding the umbrella. Under the small umbrella, the two stood very close, enough to feel the warmth of each other's bodies. Even though the rain continued to pour down heavily around them, their eyes met for a moment. Then Ling slowly shifted his gaze from Orm's eyes to his lips, before looking back into Orm's eyes. Ling's heart was racing, but she tried hard to control herself so as not to look like she was doing something wrong in front of Orm. The first day of filming for My Sherry Moore finally ended at midnight. The the crew and cast started getting ready to go home, saying goodbye to each other, including Ling, who had just finished changing her clothes. Her tired face was slightly disguised by the faint smile she gave to the few crew members who passed in front of her. Ling's footsteps were directed towards Orm, who was sitting a little further away in the corner, seemingly busy working on coursework. For Orm, waiting for Ling to finish filming was an opportunity to catch up on pending assignments, taking notes on material that might have been left behind during his busy time as Ling's personal assistant. "Come on, let's go home," Ling said, standing in front of Orm. Orm looked up from his book and looked at Ling. His hand quickly closed the book he was working on, and he smiled slightly. "Okay, fine," Orm replied as he tidied up his books and put them into his bag. After that, Orm stood up, picked up Ling's few bags of supplies and prepared to leave. The two walked to the car, which was waiting near the set. As the car drove down the deserted road, not much conversation took place between them. Both of them were lost in their own thoughts, while the sound of the car engine and the drizzling rain outside the window added to the silence between them. After 30 minutes of traveling, they finally arrived at Ling's house. Orm helped Ling carry the bags into the house, putting everything in the designated places. Orm quickly said goodbye after finishing his task. "I'm going home first, peeling," Orm said as he prepared to leave. Ling looked at Orm for a moment, then said, "It's almost midnight and it's drizzling outside. Are you sure you want to go home alone?" Orm smiled a little, trying to joke around to ease Ling's worries. "Well, if I don't go home, where will I sleep?" "In the car," he replied in a joking tone. Ling, despite smiling slightly at Orm's joke, was still worried. "Just stay there. You can go home tomorrow morning. It's dangerous for a girl to go home alone in this situation," Ling said seriously. Orm shook his head lightly, politely declining the offer. "No need, Fi, I'll just go home. Besides, my apartment isn't too far from here, and I didn't bring a change of clothes," he explained with a smile. Ling paused for a moment, then, as if coming up with a more practical idea, she said, "I have a great idea. So you don't have to come home this late every time you accompany me on a shoot." Orm gave Ling a curious look. "What is it?" "Peeling. Just stay here with me," Ling replied briefly, but firmly. "Huh?" Orm was taken aback by Ling's offer, his expression one of disbelief. "Stay there with me, so you don't have to commute from your apartment. Sometimes I can shoot later than today," Ling explained further in a calmer tone. Orm was silent for a moment, processing Ling's words. "Has Kwong stayed here too?" he asked suddenly. "Yes, Kwong has, but only when I'm busy filming. You can also stay here until my shoot is over," Ling replied, emphasizing that this was nothing new. Orm muttered under his breath, as if talking to himself. "Why didn't Kwong ever tell me about this?" Ling smiled slightly, then added, "It's only temporary to save you time and energy. But if you want to stay longer, I'm fine with that too." After thinking for a while, Orm finally nodded in agreement. "All right, but let me go home first tonight. I'll come back tomorrow with my gear," Orm said with a smile. Ling nodded, though her voice sounded a little flat. "Okay, be careful on the road. See you tomorrow, peeling." Orm bowed his body politely, saying goodbye before leaving Ling's house. Ling stood in the doorway, watching Orm's back slowly move away. There was a sudden feeling of warmth and happiness in her heart when she saw Orm accept her offer. After Orm had completely left, Ling closed the door and let out a long sigh. He gave a small cheer, feeling happy about their agreement. "Orm will stay here," Ling murmured with a big smile on her face. A feeling of excitement welled up inside her, looking forward to sharing her home with Orm, someone who was not only an assistant, but had also begun to occupy a corner of her heart. Now, with Orm living with her, Ling could feel closer to the person who had secretly made her heart beat faster. A black car pulled up in front of an elegant-looking mansion, with a large iron gate and a neat garden around it. From inside the car, Orm got out slowly. He stood for a moment, looking at the house with mixed feelings. On the one hand, the decision to stay here with Ling was practical and would save him time and energy. However, on the other hand, there was a sense of unease hanging over his heart. Even though they had spent a lot of time together, Orm felt that living in the same house with Ling brought a new dynamic that made him hesitate. Since last night, these thoughts had been disturbing his sleep. Even into the morning, he was still considering whether this was the right decision. "Are you going to keep standing there?" A voice broke her reverie. Ling stood in the doorway, looking at him with a gentle smile, as if she knew what Orm was thinking. Orm snapped out of his reverie and quickly shook his head. "I'll get my stuff out first, Fi," he replied rather awkwardly. He hurriedly opened the trunk of the car, taking out the suitcases and bags he was carrying. Seeing Orm struggling to carry the items, Ling walked over without saying much. "Let me help," she said as she swiftly took Orm's large suitcase. Orm wanted to refuse, but Ling had already taken the suitcase and entered the house. Not wanting to appear stubborn, Orm simply carried the other bag and followed Ling inside. "Which room will I be staying in, Fi?" Orm finally asked after passing through the spacious and elegant living room. "My room," Ling replied simply, without turning around. "Huh?" Orm was startled, halting his steps. Ling stopped and turned her head with a small smile, then quickly corrected herself. "I mean, you can stay in the room near mine." "Oh," Orm murmured in relief. His heart almost beat faster at the thought of sharing a room with Ling. Ling nodded, then continued up the stairs. "Come on, I'll take you to your room," she said as she continued to carry Orm's suitcase. Orm followed behind, taking in the luxurious yet cozy interior of the house. The room Ling was referring to was on the second floor, directly opposite Ling's room. After arriving, Ling opened the door to the room and entered, followed by Orm, who continued to remain silent. "Think of it as your own home. Don't be shy," Ling said with a smile, her eyes looking sincerely at Orm. Orm just nodded slowly, yes, peeling. "Thank you." His voice was almost a whisper. "I'll start tidying up my things first." "All right then," Ling replied with a wider smile before leaving the room. After Ling left, Orm sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes roaming around the room he was in. It was much bigger and more luxurious than his apartment, and from today on, he would be occupying this room until Ling's filming was over. Ling looked thoughtfully at the thick paper in her hand. The script of my Shariamor that she was about to start and looked quite challenging. The dialogues were heavy, using formal language that was rarely used, considering the series was set in the 90s. Occasionally, Ling would mumble to herself, repeating the lines she wanted to memorize. "It's not too difficult, it's just the language," Ling muttered under her breath, finding it difficult to pronounce some words. Meanwhile, Orm, who had just come out of the room after tidying up, saw Ling sitting in the living room with the script in her hands. Orm smiled at how serious Ling was, then walked slowly over to her. "Is Fi memorizing the script?" Orm asked as he sat beside Ling. Ling turned her head and gave a small smile. "Yeah, there's no filming today, so I thought I'd stay home and focus on studying the script," Ling replied as she showed the script in her hand. "Are you going to campus yet?" Orm glanced at his watch before replying. "My class starts at 11, so there's still about an hour left before I leave." Ling nodded, then went back to looking at his script for a moment. After a few seconds, she looked at Orm again. "Then, since you haven't left yet, can you help me practice the script?" Orm looked a little surprised, but he replied with a smile. Help, how? Fi. Ling smiled wider, her eyes sparkling. I want you to help me practice my lines. In this series, I have to play a character who has a lover. So, maybe you can pretend to be my lover for this exercise. Lover. Orm immediately felt his heart pounding. Has Kwong ever asked Fi to help with this kind of training? He asked, trying to shift focus. Ling chuckled, then nodded. Yes, Kwong often helps me practice the script, but he's never helped with the part I'm about to ask for. What does Fi mean? Orm looked at Ling in surprise. Ling placed her script on the table, then sat closer to Orm. I want to practice the romantic scene. In this series, the characters start approaching their lovers first, and I want to try practicing that part. What do you think? You can help me, right? Ling explained while looking at Orm with a calm yet serious expression. Romantic scene? Orm widened his eyes, not expecting to be asked to help rehearse for such a scene. His heart began to fidget, but Ling just smiled gently as if everything was normal. Yes, Ling replied casually, and I need you to help me run through some parts of this scene. Let me get more into character. Orm was silent for a moment, considering Ling's request. On the one hand, he felt awkward, but on the other hand, Ling was completely serious and asked him with confidence. After thinking for a moment, Orm nodded slowly. All right, I'll help, Fi, he said finally. Ling's eyes lit up with pleasure at the answer. Good, then let's get started, Ling said, quickly picking up the script again, reading it for a while, then putting it back on the table. Ling leaned closer to Orm, his hand slowly touching Orm's, giving a hint of tension in the air. In this scene, the character begins to gently approach his lover, Ling said, her eyes remaining focused on Orm. Orm held his breath, his eyes glancing at Ling's hand that was now clasping his gently. No more words came out of Orm's mouth, only growing nervousness. Ling gently kissed the back of Orm's hand. His eyes remained locked on Orm, as if to ensure that his every move was perfectly recorded in Orm's mind. After that, slowly, Ling's hand moved down and moved to Orm's thigh. His movements were quiet yet intentional, making Orm feel a sudden warmth enveloping his body. Ling brought his face closer, making the distance between them almost disappear. Orm's heart was racing so loud it felt like it could be heard. Ling's warm breath was felt around his ears, and when Ling's lips touched his cheek, Orm's body froze. The touch was gentle but enough to make the awkwardness and trembling fill. Orm. Ling didn't stop there. His hand gently stroked Orm's hair, giving him an indescribable sensation. Is this enough to prove that I love you? Ling whispered in Orm's ear, his soft voice making Orm's body stiffen even more. His fingers moved slowly on Orm's thigh, leaving a trail of strange feelings mixed between confusion and attraction. Orm could only mutter, as he nodded. Although he was sure this was just part of the script rehearsal, there was something in the way Ling spoke and touched him that felt different. He felt confused and had difficulty breathing, as if his body refused to move even though his rational mind knew this was just a rehearsal. Ling smiled a small smile, a smile that contained a deeper meaning. I will prove more if I really love you, Ling said again, this time in a lower voice, almost a whisper, as if she wanted only Orm to hear her. His nose now touching Orm's cheek, Ling took a deep breath, as if inhaling the scent of Orm's skin. Orm could feel his heartbeat getting more and more uncontrollable, as if his breathing was being held back by the increasingly intimate atmosphere. Without saying much, Ling slowly pushed Orm's body backwards, making him lie down on the sofa. Ling's movements were very gentle, as if he didn't want to make Orm feel forced. Orm followed the direction of the movement, his body now lying on the bottom. While Ling looked at him from above, there was a smile on Ling's face, a smile that was full of meaning, but difficult to guess. Ling's face came closer again, his warm breath touching Orm's face that was still lying stiffly beneath him. Orm didn't know what to do. His body felt so heavy to move, while his mind was spinning endlessly. His heart was filled with doubt, but at the same time, there was a strong sense of curiosity as to what would happen next. As Ling's face drew closer, Orm could only stare back with widened eyes. The tension grew until Ling finally placed a small peck on his nose. The gentle touch made Orm's body tremble subtly. Ling then rubbed their noses together, making the physical distance between them almost non-existent. Orm closed his eyes as if he knew what would happen next. His heart beat still, couldn't calm down after that closeness with Ling. But suddenly the sound of a cell phone ringing broke the silence, startling both of them and shattering the intense atmosphere. Orm opened his eyes quickly, waking up from the moment, and immediately pushed Ling's body lightly, giving her room to sit upright again. "I need to take this call first, Peeling," Orm said hurriedly as he reached into his pants pocket for his cell phone. His voice sounded nervous, as if he needed an excuse to escape from a situation that confused him. Quickly, he stood up from the sofa and walked away, answering the incoming call without looking back at Ling. Ling, who was still sitting on the sofa, stared at Orm's departure with annoyance. Her breathing was slightly labored, not because of physical exertion, but rather because of an unfulfilled desire. "That was a close one," she muttered under her breath, frustrated that the moment had been interrupted by something as trivial as a phone call. With an annoyed grunt, Ling picked up the script she had left on the table. Trying to distract herself, she began to reread the dialogue in the script. A few minutes later, the sound of Orm's steps could be heard again in the living room. Orm walked over with a slightly hurried expression. "Peeling, I have to go now," he said while looking at Ling, who was still sitting on the sofa with the script in her hands. Ling stared back with a confused look, clearly not expecting it. "Now? But your class doesn't start until 11, right?" she asked, trying to understand why Orm suddenly wanted to leave so soon. Orm nodded as he explained. "The lecturer moved the class schedule forward, so I need to get to campus right away." His voice sounded serious, although he still looked a little awkward after what had just happened between them. "Alright then," Ling replied briefly, without holding back much. Orm quickly turned around and walked towards his room to get his bag and car keys. What had been an intense atmosphere turned awkward. Moments later, Orm came out of his room, ready to leave. "I'll go first, Peeling," he said goodbye while giving a small smile, trying to avoid Ling's gaze. After the door closed, Ling placed the manuscript on the table and leaned her body against the sofa. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, feeling empty. Ling took a deep breath, trying to let go of the disappointment lodged in her chest. If she had moved faster, she might have gotten the chance to kiss Orm on the lips like she wanted to. The clock struck 1 p.m. Orm stood near his car, his eyes occasionally glancing around, as if waiting for someone who had arrived late. The hot sun shone on the asphalt beneath his feet, making the air feel hotter than usual. However, Orm remained patient, standing upright while checking his cell phone. Not long after, a hand tapped him on the shoulder from behind, making Orm immediately turn his head. Behind him stood Min, with a tired smile on her face. "Sorry for making you wait so long," Min said with a slightly guilty tone. Min." Orm gave Min a worried look, then without hesitation cupped both of Min's cheeks. "What's wrong with your face? Why is it bruised like this? Did I have a fight with someone?" he asked persistently, his eyes focused on examining the bruises on Min's cheeks. There was obvious concern in his gaze. Min smiled slightly, holding Orm's hand still on her cheek. "No, it's just a small cut I got when I accidentally bumped into it in my apartment," she replied casually, as if the wound on her face was no big deal. Orm breathed a sigh of relief at that explanation. "Thank goodness," he said, removing his hand from Min's cheek. "I thought if I had gotten into a fight with someone." Min chuckled softly. "That couldn't have happened. I'm old enough not to get involved in arguments like that," she replied, this time with a wider smile. "By the way, thank you for accepting my request. My parents insisted on having lunch with you before they left today." "No problem, Fi. Coincidentally, I don't have any work today, so I can easily spare the time," Orm replied with a smile, indicating that he was happy with the plan. Min smiled with satisfaction. "Shall we go now?" she asked, extending a hand towards Orm. "Come on, let's go," replied Orm excitedly, grasping Min's hand firmly. The two of them walked towards Min's car, which they would use to leave together. After a long journey, Min and Orm finally arrived in front of a luxurious restaurant. The restaurant looked elegant with classic architecture and soft lighting, giving it an exclusive feel. Min got out of the car first. Then, with a thoughtful gesture, he opened the door for Orm and extended his hand. "Thank you, Min," Orm said as he got out of the car, smiling at Min. His hand now moved to hold Min's hand, walking hand in hand towards the entrance of the restaurant. Inside the restaurant, they were directed by the waiter to their reserved table. There, Min's parents were waiting for them. Their faces were beaming at Orm and Min's arrival. "Sawadika, Kunmei, Kunfu," greeted Orm politely to Min's father and mother, bowing slightly as a sign of respect. "Orm," exclaimed Mrs. Min enthusiastically. A big smile graced her face at the sight of Orm, and she even hugged him briefly, indicating how pleased she was with his presence. "Come sit down, son," she said again. Orm nodded and sat on the chair that had been prepared. Min sat next to Orm, occasionally smiling a little at the interaction between Orm and his mother. They all quickly ordered their food, choosing the sumptuous dishes offered by the restaurant, then continued their light conversation while waiting for the dishes to arrive. "Min was finally able to bring you here," said Mrs. Min, her tone sounding pleased and satisfied. Her eyes looked at Min, as if hinting that she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Orm is very busy with his studies and work, so he only has time now, Fu Mei," said Min as she smiled kindly at her parents. Orm quickly added, "I'm sorry." Orm only had time to fulfill Kunfu and Kunmei's invitation. He bowed his head slightly, showing respect and regret for not being able to come. "It's okay, son," Min's father replied with a warm smile. "Min told us that you just started working, so we understand." Orm smiled with relief at Min's father's kind response. "Yes, Orm wants to gain new experience, so he's trying to work while studying," he explained, trying to explain his situation to Min's father and mother. After listening to Orm's explanation, Min's father suddenly made a comment that made the atmosphere change slightly. "If you marry Min, you won't have to bother working. Min will give you everything." Orm smiled slightly, while Min only responded to his father's words with a small smile without commenting further. Not long after, Min's mother asked a question that made Orm and Min look at each other. "You guys have been dating for a long time. Is there no intention of getting married or just getting engaged?" For a moment, there was silence. Min looked at Orm, searching for the right answer to the question. After a few seconds, Min spoke calmly. "We'll talk about that when Orm has finished his master's degree. We don't need to rush, Fu Mei." However, Mrs. Min seemed dissatisfied with that answer. "There's no need to get married quickly. The important thing is to get engaged first. That way Min won't look at other women." "Right, Norm," Orm chuckled before answering. "Min won't look at other women. He's already crazy about me," Orm said in a joking yet warm tone, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Hearing that, Min didn't want to be left out. and immediately wrapped her arms around Orm's shoulders. Right. Let's see, who isn't crazy about Orm Kornnaphat? Min spoke with a proud smile, then pinched Orm's cheek lightly. I'm already crazy about him. Fu, May, so don't worry. I won't look at other women. Min continued in a joking yet loving tone. Min's father smiled at Min's words, but he still gave a serious warning. Keep your promise as a man. Don't embarrass Fu. Min, in a tone full of confidence, replied quickly, I promise to take good care of Orm, as always. No need to worry, Fu. He then gently stroked Orm's hair. The conversation at the dinner table continued in a lighter mood. Although the topic of marriage had created a little tension, both Orm and Min managed to keep the atmosphere warm and full of laughter. Min's mother and father also seemed satisfied, while Orm and Min remained supportive of each other, showing that their relationship was as strong and trusting as a couple, despite being built on a complicated deal. Thank you, Min, for dropping me off, Orm said after getting out of Min's car. He smiled slightly, feeling relieved after the long journey. Min looked up at the luxurious mansion that stood majestically before her. So, you're staying here now? He asked, a little surprised by the luxury he saw. Yes, but only temporarily. Until peeling as filming is finished, Orm replied with a smile, trying to explain lightly. Min nodded slowly, seemingly thinking about something. Oh, I see, he murmured with a faint smile on his lips, his eyes fixed on Orm. Thank you again for taking the time to meet my parents. And sorry about that question earlier, she continued, her tone sounding sincere. Orm shook his head slowly. No problem, Fi. We agreed from the start to help each other with this, he replied casually, as if emphasizing the agreement they had made. The deal was actually quite complicated. Orm and Min agreed to pretend to be dating in front of their parents. It was all to please their parents. More than that, Min asked Orm's help to cover up the fact that she liked the same sex, something that Min was not ready to reveal to her family. Min smiled a little before asking in a teasing tone, have you ever imagined that Fi really likes you and we go out? Orm just chuckled at the question. I did, when we first met, but I'm glad we're both same-sex lovers, he replied in a casual tone, as if recalling the moment they first met. Min laughed along, then opened the back car door and picked up some bags of groceries. These are yours, Min said as she handed the bags to Orm. Thank you, Fi, Orm replied as he accepted the bags with a warm smile. He then glanced at the bruises on Min's face. Don't forget to treat this bruise of yours. Min smiled, placed her hand on Orm's head, then brought her face closer to Orm's. Don't worry, it's only a small wound. Small wounds can become big if left untreated, Orm replied, making Min chuckle. Meanwhile, inside the house, Ling, who was in the living room, took off her earphones when she heard voices outside. She got up from her chair and walked towards the main door, curiosity clouding her mind. As soon as the door opened, Ling saw Orm and a man laughing together. Her mood changed instantly. There was a heat in her chest that she couldn't explain. Sawadi, Ling greeted Min politely upon noticing Ling's presence. Orm immediately turned his head, seeing Ling standing in the doorway. His heart fluttered because Ling's expression and gaze were different from usual, a cold, piercing gaze, as if it was like he wanted to kill someone. Someone? Sawadika? Ling replied in a flat tone after a moment of silence. Min smiled casually. I finally get to meet a famous Thai artist in person, she said in a light tone, her eyes fixed on Ling with a look that was hard to interpret. Orm, who felt the atmosphere was getting awkward, immediately cut in. Min, you'd better go home now. It's getting late, he said as he patted Min's shoulder gently. Huh? I just wanted to have a quick chat with Ling, Min replied, still in a casual tone. Go home, Orm urged again, this time in a firmer tone. Min finally gave in. Alright, I'll go home, she said, obeying. About your car, I'll take care of it right away. Thank you very much, Fi, Orm replied with a faint smile. See you soon, Min said as she waved to Orm before getting into the car. See you soon, Kunling, she added, this time to Ling. Orm stood in the courtyard of the house, watching as Min's car drove away. Once the car was completely out of sight, Orm let out a long sigh and turned around. He briefly made eye contact with Ling before Ling turned his face away and entered the house without a word. Orm followed her in, feeling the atmosphere getting heavier. In the living room, Ling sat on the sofa, not saying a word. Orm felt awkward, not knowing where to start the conversation. Did Peeling have dinner? Asked Orm finally, trying to break the silence. I have, Ling replied briefly, without taking her eyes off the book she was reading. Alright, then I'll go to my room first. If Peeling needs anything, don't hesitate to tell me, Orm said, trying to keep his tone light. I don't need anything. You can rest. It must be tiring going out with your girlfriend. Orm was silent, not knowing what to say. He could only stare at Ling's back as he got up from the sofa and walked away, leaving him still standing stiffly in the living room. He scratched the nape of his neck, wondering to himself what had made Ling act so coldly.